This is just going to be an informal video giving some information around Lightroom and the use of it for some of the car pictures that you're going to be taking. So take all this with a picture, so all this is just my own experience, and it'll just be very rough. But camera settings, I know you mentioned that if you're looking at getting something like a GH5 or similar, that'll certainly do the job. You're just looking at that high resolution, that'll be useful. Typical, the kind of mistake that I see people make is cameras like that have an option of taking raw pictures or writing JPEG pictures directly in the camera. There is a difference between the two, and it's worth considering shooting RAW over JPEG. RAW basically collects all the raw data as the sensor sees it and records it unprocessed, giving you the maximum amount of information in the file for if you're editing. Gives you the ability to pull back a lot of information out of the shadows, as an example, where JPEG basically makes an assumption of how it looks and kind of processes the pixels and colors in that image to look a certain way, and after that it's quite difficult to process an image and make it look as good as a RAW can. But either way, for a fast execution, if you're not editing the image, a JPEG is very good, especially coming out of a high quality camera. Other camera settings, I wouldn't worry too much about delving into it, especially if times are concerned, but just focus on getting the actual shot composed correctly. Focus on making sure that the focus point is accurate and the shot is in focus. And then after that, the next kind of easiest thing to move along to is just using the aperture priority mode and just controlling the depth of field. So something like an f4 would give you that low kind of depth of field look if you're just focusing on a bit of detail in the car, and then looking at f22 for something that will take the whole scene into focus, but you don't need to go quite that high up the settings anyway. So that's an option there. But getting into Lightroom, basically, this is what Lightroom looks like. I'm going to keep it relatively simple what I explained. If you can hit import, basically go into there, find your card, camera card, etc., then pull in a load of files. So these are all the files that we've got from the Mercedes shoot. These, I say, are all edited pictures. These aren't really the best examples, but I want to show you a couple of things and the differences that it makes. So basically, this is an edited file here. If we look at the file before, you can see that realistically the camera captured quite a dull and flat image just from all the light coming through the windows, but a quick edit kind of spices it up a little bit and gives it a bit more pop. These aren't the best examples, but just showing that's what this editing configuration I've done on the right hand side here has done. So there's one thing editing the entire image, and there's a couple of brush adjustments which you can see in red here, where I've kind of pulled the shadows back and made it up the exposure a bit in some areas of the cars, etc. So you can probably see how that makes a difference there. Very minor. Obviously cropping is very easy there. Let's just show you a few different examples of some pictures where it's made a bit of a difference. Look at this one. So it's before and after. So you can see there the wheel comes out a bit more. You pull in out the light and shadows there. Apart from the rest of that image, nothing else too exciting. These cars here against the window, so they would have been fairly dark. We've managed to lighten them up again. So let's just run through the configuration of this. So if I reset that image, so that's how it was stock. So I do have some presets that I use on my camera. It's basically kind of my desired style, but I'll run you through what they are. Sorry, okay, so that's gone on there, so that's the configuration. So first things to this, we can just crop it pretty simply there, so we can straighten up a bit. That's pretty simple. Then this is kind of roughly what I've gone for, but the exposure is still quite down a bit on this, so we can bring that up a little bit. The brush tool here, I've kind of made my own presets here, but we can kind of bring a little bit of exposure back and pull the shadows back a little bit in the car here, just to make the cars look a little bit brighter. Then you can do stuff like mess with the color temperature to make it look a bit warmer, a little bit cooler, etc. That's one thing. Then the highlights, basically, you can see if we pull the highlights down, it brings out some of the some of the highlights in the image. So we kind of sit with that about there. The shadows would take the image from something like that, pulling out shadows. You can see that starts to make the image look quite a bit better. And the whites and the blacks do quite a similar thing, really, to the above two, but in a slightly different metric way. You can make the blacks very black or the whites very white, etc. And then clarity, this does vary camera to camera, but you can actually make the image look a bit sharper. I don't like to go too far with that, but you get an idea of that. And obviously then increase the saturation of colours or the vibrance of the colours as you choose. These are the kind of fundamental base settings of Lightroom, and it turns an image from that to that pretty easily. So you'll get the idea of that over time. More stuff in here. The stuff like vignetting, if you wanted to add a vignette to the image. What else we got? So enabling profile correction. So you might find some lenses warp the image a bit, so you can kind of correct that. The lens I didn't make too much of an issue. Some images you might find shooting in the dark might start to have a bit of noise in the image. It just catches up. So this is definitely a bad example, but so a bit of noise. You can probably see down here. I don't know if the video will show it, but a bit of grainy effect on there. You can actually start to cancel that out. So noise cancellation kind of smooths it out. It does drop a bit of quality, but helps overall look of the image in some cases, especially in the shadows of cars, etc. So that's an example of a picture. Let's have a look at another one. So this was a before and after. So you can see with that, what have we done? So if we reset that image, so with this, I won't use a preset this time, but typically I'll know the shadows and will need to be lifted quite a bit there. I'll drop them highlights back down. You can see them houses roofs kind of come up a bit nicer there. We'll lift the whites, drop the blacks a little bit, not too much. Then I'm just going to use a brush tool, and I'll just set this to lifting the exposure a little bit. And then what we can do is just see if we can improve this. Make this blue stand out a little bit more here, so it's not too dark. Maybe lift the wheel a little bit, and just those few adjustments take the image from that to that. Nice and simple, and then you can click through onto the next image. You can make your adjustments there, etc. Let's just have a quick look at some outdoor ones. So this one as an example, so that's the before, so we'll reset it. So to improve this image, I think once again we'll look at just lifting the shadows a little bit, dropping highlights back down. Something a little bit different with this one is that sky, as you'll know, it's kind of a rainy day. So what we can do is we can adjust the exposure on the sky there. I can make it a little bit more bluer, not too much because it'll start to look fake, but we can give it a feel like that. So on and off, you get the idea, it makes it look a little bit more appealing. Then maybe some local brush adjustments just inside some of these cars here. It's only minor, but just enough to make it look a little bit lighter under that canopy, and then maybe a little bit of a crop. The crop is this button here, just to adjust the image there, and then it takes us from something like that to something like that. It looks a little bit more appealing, and maybe on that image you also want to bring the exposure up just a little bit, even the clarity a little bit. So just some of these little settings make a fair bit of difference to the image. So yeah, but have a go with it, get some stuff imported, have a play. I can give you more advice on this over time, etc. Once you're done, basically you can select all on the bottom, and then if you export, so there's various ways of doing this. I'm on a Mac, so I use Command Shift and E for export. Then you just name it, so call it Mercedes of Erdington, etc. That'll name your folder, that'll name your files. I'm limiting the file sizes to 400K, 2000 pixels wide, sharpened for screen, and then I just hit export, and that will export all those raw files to JPEG. Yeah, so that gives you an idea. So that's just 10 minutes of a quick insight to Lightroom. I hope it helps. If it's not for you, don't worry about it. But yeah, a little bit of education for you.